During the Xbox Series X showcase event on May 7th of last year, we saw a sneak peek of several games promised to come to Microsoft's platform in the following months and year. However, from this showcase in specific, only 2 games from the entire 47-minute digital event caught my attention. The first was Bright Memory Infinite, that is hopefully coming later this year, and you can catch a review of the first game with the help of that card up top. And then there was SCARLET NEXUS, an anime action game focusing on psychic powers, bright colors, and style. It seemed to have a lot of promise, in other words. So I kept it on my radar until today. I'm very ready to share my thoughts on this one with you all. So let's just go ahead and jump in, shall we? Well, I have to say I enjoyed SCARLET NEXUS, but of course no game is perfect, and this is certainly no exception. I feel like I've said that exact sentence before. Oh well. I was actually about to start this video with a brief plot summary, but I quickly realized I don't want to do that for a number of reasons. Firstly, there would be a lot to cover. Second, I have a feeling I'm already going to be kinda scatterbrained in this video because there are just so many interconnected mechanics and things to explain. Thirdly, this game has a great deal of world building alongside interesting lore for the world itself, so I'm going to tell you about the stuff that I like the most, and also the least amount of spoilery stuff I can, just in case you want to play it for yourself after this is all said and done. So, to give you a baseline introduction would go a little something like this. Once upon a time, far into the future, the world has been plagued by a phenomenon known as the Extinction Belt, a nebulous cloud spanning the sky that creates and sends down creatures known as Others, violent monsters that feed on one thing and only one thing: human brains. Conveniently, around the same time as the Extinction Belt appeared, humans started having their psionic hormones awaken, giving many individuals psychic powers, and in an effort to fight back the Others, the OSF, or Others Suppression Force, was created. And that's just the world. There is a full cast of characters that have so much depth and development written into them. Yuito is a kind-hearted, overly trusting and forgiving hero, a descendant of royalty and a family with a political background. And also one of the 2 playable characters, he wields psychokinesis, the ability to move and manipulate objects to his will.
No way!
Shut up. Then there's the second playable character, Kasane, a cold and analytical girl adopted from an early age by a wealthy family. She's blunt and does not mince words. She was scouted by the OSF at an early age for her outstanding combat abilities and psychokinetics, but she remained very protective of her younger sister and anyone else who she grows attached to. In addition, there are 9 party members you'll eventually gain access to, and throughout the game you can have opportunities to strengthen your bond with each one of them. There are 6 levels of bond that you can acquire with each of the 9 party members. You do this by watching these so-called bond missions play out during the intermissions of a phase in the main story, essentially chapters that break up the events into digestible chunks. Each bond episode can take anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, and you do this to gain special advantages and abilities in combat, but also to learn more about them as individuals. Hanabi is a cute pyrokinetic girl who has the hots for Yuito, big time, being childhood friends and also being raised around wealth. Shiden is an electrokinetic brat who constantly talks down to others and barks back at any words he hears, positive or negative. He values strength and intelligence above anything else. Gemma is a thing that I can't pronounce, but his power is defense. He's a veteran of the OSF and it's all he knows. Kyoka uses duplication and is a commander in the OSF. After becoming her commanding officer at a young age, she has become very protective of Kasane. She's very loving and kind, but constantly seems to be hiding something. She also can't cook for
Kyoka said she cooked something for us. And when I took a bite, my whole body went numb.
Tsugumi is shy and quiet, but also clairvoyant. She has trouble speaking up and making friends because she can see right through people, in more ways than one. Thus, she tends to not go out of her way for others. Kagero is a sly, smooth talker. He uses his invisibility to sneak around and has made quite the name for himself as an untrustworthy backstabber, but you can tell he probably does have a heart of gold underneath all that bravado. Luca uses teleportation. Now, he might look like just a child, but he's fully grown. He's also fully jacked. He loves to lift weights and work out, and he goes hard with it too, like when he asked Kasane to push down the bar with her powers to test his strength. The guy's a nut, but he's smart. Very reasonable and strategic. One of the OSF's elite Septentrions. Fun fact, he's voiced by Tanjiro's voice actor, which is pretty neat because I started and finished Demon Slayer while playing through this game. And finally there's Arashi, a lazy but highly intelligent commander in the OSF. She puts on a face for the press, but when she's out of the public's eye, she just wants to J-chill. She uses Velocikinesis. Yeah, some of the names are a bit much. She's super fast, basically. It really is surprising how much development each and every one of these characters gets. Some of them are a little predictable, like Kasane learning to be more open to people and stuff, but some of the Bond episodes are pretty heartwarming. Every single one of them gets a unique arc throughout the game. I don't really want to spoil any of them for you, but some of them are interesting to see play out. It was surprising to me that I ended up enjoying every character by the end of the game. None of them were insufferable for very long, at least. Unless you can't stand this kind of thing. Then you might have a problem, but all this development goes a long way in making them feel a lot more like people rather than slots and icons in a menu by the end. However, one small thing here that will kind of be a major point of contention throughout this entire video: it takes so long. Like I said, participating in these Bond episodes gets you a lot of perks and special attacks in battle, and you want these attacks, as I'll explain in a bit. But let's say you want to max out Hanabi's Bond to get her hard-hitting finisher attack. That would mean you'd need to watch around 2.5 hours of conversation to get that stuff. And yes, I said watch. Very rarely do these involve touching your controller, and that goes for all 9 party members. You do get some easy Bond levels with a few towards the end of the game, but that's the only exception. And if you want those perks for both characters, you'll have to watch and participate in that character's Bond episodes for both Kasane and Yuito. They both bond in different ways for every character after all, and you have to sit down and watch it all play out. You can't max out a character just by watching the episodes though. You have to get that last level or two by giving them gifts that you can find or make throughout the game. But the amount I did do took long enough. I started to skim through or skip entire episodes by the time I got to the tail end of the second story, but it was still such a time sink. And skimming stuff to cut the length of the game down hurts it anyway, because there isn't nearly as much time to get to know the characters and make big moments as impactful as they're meant to be. Of course, you're not forced to watch it all, you can skip cutscenes after all, but I feel like there had to be a more interactive way to get to know these characters in 45 hours. I mean, after getting the achievements for watching everyone's Bond episodes, you can see that less than 1% of players have been doing this. It's true that the game is still relatively new, but I think this still kind of speaks to how monotonous these can be to get through. As I said, a select few see you accompanying the character somewhere and engaging in some combat or exploring somewhere, but 9 times out of 10 you'll just be watching these dialogue exchanges. And on that, let's talk presentation. All in all, I'd say the game looks pretty solid. The backgrounds are my first takeaway. If you stop and look at what's in the distance, you will be pleasantly surprised by the amount of detail. A lot is often conveyed through these impressively realized dioramas. And the details are paid attention to on a micro scale as well. The environments you walk and fight through are just as visually interesting most of the time. It can get a bit dank on occasion, but it doesn't stay that way for long. Particle effects and light sources do a good job in making combat look like a spectacle, and harsh choices in color can be intentionally overwhelming, but in a good way. A small disappointment would be that there aren't enough options to customize the experience on PC. Even if this was marketed as a game for next generation boxes, some proper options would be appreciated. Mods have already been created to fix a few annoyances, but it'd be nice to have them natively. Oh, and I truly hope that we can get rid of the constant tip boxes in the corner of the screen. And as I mentioned before, the dialogue exchanges. They aren't terrible, all things considered. It's talking heads and static dioramas of the action. There are often some attempts to make the pictures move and fly around the screen to maybe keep your attention, but it falls kind of flat. And again, it's mostly due to the length. Going off the assumption that action game fans such as myself are kind of twitchy and have a hard time focusing on something for very long, I can't imagine I'm alone in saying that these 10 to 15 minute exposition dumps don't hold my attention all that well. And I can't help but think that that's due to the length of the entire game. It's not just the Bond episodes that tend to last a little longer, some of these cutscenes creep into Metal Gear territory. There are even occasions where you're given control, take 2 steps, and then are back to watching a cutscene. So your enjoyment might hinge on whether or not you can set the controller down and watch a couple of portraits lip flap at each other. There are times where the game goes fully animated and it looks great when it does happen. Not really on the same level as Kakarot or even Genshin Impact if you want my honest opinion, but it's still good. Most of the narrative, lore, character explanation, and everything in between will be an audiobook with some JPEGs to look at. I guess it can't be helped with a game as large as this, but it sucks, because just as the presentation starts to wear down on me, the narrative starts to pick up. Everything is just a little complex to completely wrap your head around initially. Things that have a huge impact on things happen off screen and are glossed over. Even after my second playthrough and 45 hours of playtime, I don't fully understand the main villain's plan. And I still couldn't tell you the specifics on Suo and Seiron, two regions that are at war with each other during the game. I know more about Togetsu because we actually have a journey to get there, and it's totally unique from any other point in the game. Well, on top of the regular talking Muppet heads, there's also this Brain Talk menu. It's basically where the characters text each other back and forth. I really like this little feature. There's one instance where Shiden gets called out by one of the captains for looking down on Kagero for being an adult, which is a member of the OSF who was recruited later in life and thought to be less useful than a scouted member. Then there is one instance where Yuito is in a group chat with his new platoon and starts flirting with a girl, and his friend who actually liked her mentions that he feels like a third wheel. There are in-person conversations that get heated, and then they text later on and it's like everyone is cooled down. It's pretty realistic human interaction from this anime game to apologize in a text after everyone is cooled down. It's cute stuff like that, but then it also gets a little strange. Like, the bond system kind of feels like it was being put before the narrative, and also logic and reason. At one point in the story, the group splits, and each side is essentially trying to kill each other. But after each phase in the story, you can just go on dates with people on the opposite side like nothing has even happened. This is because the game knows that you'll be getting back together later on, so you can't be behind on your bond level, so there are episodes to see play out in the middle of this deadly feud. Oh yes, Sugumi, I'd love to give gardening a try. If you die first! And Yuito. The boy is too forgiving. Yes, that's an established trait of his, but there's a limit, bro. Slight early game spoilers here, but Kasane is caught with a bloody knife standing over Yuito's father. Then proceeds to tell Yuito, "You're next, little boy." But all he can muster to say is, "Why?" Then all Kasane's friends text Yuito later and are like, "Wow, that was pretty awkward, wasn't it? Wanna go get tea?" Makes it feel like none of the characters' actions have any real weight, because nobody cares about things like that. You could say that the characters are trying to get their minds off of things by ignoring them, but that's weak. If someone killed your dad in front of you, you wouldn't go get f***ing Eggs Benedict with the accomplices the next day. But it also just comes down to the fact that I got sick of it. This game has two stories to experience, Yuito's and Kasane's. Okay, seeing the unique things from Kasane's perspective was neat. I liked a lot of the things that her squad had to deal with. It was neat enough to justify being included in the game. But making the player go through the same areas, the same combat encounters, watch the same exact dialogue exchanges was frankly maddening. The two stories could have been easily condensed down into one. If it had been a swapping scenario, I think it would have been much more engaging. Like after playing a certain point in the beginning as Yuito, you swap and see Kasane's unique point of view. That way you could get to know both of the player characters firsthand, as well as their squads, making it a bit of a moral dilemma on who you're rooting for when they actually conflict with each other. And when they eventually rejoin forces with each other, the player can choose who they want to play with, because that is a large portion of the end of the game, around 6 hours actually. That's 6 hours of playing exactly what you played, but again. It'd be better for the game in almost every way. The story would keep its suspense, the areas would still be fresh, and you could even allow them to swap characters on the fly if they want, like you can after completing both campaigns. Because if I'm being honest, one of these things is not like the other. Baseline impressions, combat is a lot of fun once you unlock the right skills. With Yuito. Let me break him down real quick before we go any further. It's an RPG because every game these days needs an experience bar and skills to unlock. Scarlet Nexus is no different.
Big whoop, wanna fight about it?
You have a basic 3-hit string that can eventually be lengthened to 5 by mashing the X button. The Y button sends Yuito's sword around him and can extend combos. Eventually it can be charged. There's a dedicated launcher with A and X, which can lead into some grin-inducing combos. There's a dodge button that can be timed just right for a perfect dodge, because of course, and the crowning jewel of this system, the psionic powers. With a squeeze of that right trigger, you'll lift and throw whatever object you've highlighted at the time. This can have some different effect depending on when you do it and what it follows up on. Hitting X after an object makes contact will dash Yuito over to the target. This also works beautifully in the air, encouraging me to see how many others I can take down before I touch the ground. You can alternate psionic throws and physical attacks, and they both get stronger with every successful hit, up to a climax at 5. There are sometimes special objects in the environment that can be thrown by holding down the left trigger. These objects are extremely helpful if used correctly. I like to compare them to the items in Smash Bros. They are too overpowered to not take advantage of. A small quirk that I find particularly noteworthy: if you can recognize the object and have memorized the button prompts, you can keep up with the animation as it plays out, instead of stopping every few seconds to register what needs to be done, making the attack flow seamlessly once you get the hang of it. Some even contain oil or water, which leaves enemies open to a follow-up by one of your party members. Each member of your party has a certain ability that you can tap into with the use of the SAS, or Struggle Arms system. Basically, they lend you their psychic power for a limited time. Hanabi sets your sword on fire, setting enemies covered in oil ablaze and stunning them in the process. Luca allows you to close in on enemies in an instant with teleportation. Gemma turns you completely invulnerable, acting as a makeshift parry in some situations. Tsugumi lets you see the battlefield more clearly, and many more. On top of this, at Bond level 3, you get an ally's combo vision. Basically a hard-hitting attack that you can use in the middle of any combo. These are such amazing tools to unleash on enemies. They pack such a punch and are more unique than just a static sword swing. And then at Bond level 4, you unlock Assault Vision. Essentially a finishing move that activates sort of at random when an enemy is stunned or knocked down. There is never a downside to using them, and they often show up back to back, so spam away. And then finally there's Brain Field, a super state that can be activated when a meter fills that allows you to win the game. Nah, I'm only mostly kidding, but it is very powerful, again, if you have the right skills unlocked. The two that make it most broken are the ones that cut damage taken in half while in Brain Field, and then the second that does the same thing, making you completely invulnerable. When the situation becomes hectic, just activate it and all the enemies are lined back up right in front of you, and all you have to do is just keep mashing X. All of your abilities are amplified, so I always just mash X, which slams large columns on the enemies repeatedly. It gets repetitious and a little boring, but it's really strong and good in a pinch, so what can you do? Okay, all of these things make Yubito a great character to control and pull off some sick combos with. Launching an enemy and keeping them up there with a combination of melee swings, combo vision, and throwing objects feels great. So why is Kasane none of that stuff? Honest to God, it's all personal preference, but while Yubito rocks that sword, Kasane's weapons of choice are knives. And you still have to get close to enemies, but her knives are most effective at a slight distance, a step or two back. Since the first few attacks have her sending them forward, the hitboxes aren't directly in front of her. They're a bit farther out, and the Y button isn't a combo extender like Yuito's. In fact, she jumps away from the enemy, and its recovery time is too long to allow for any follow-up. This kept messing with me so hard. She could only keep a combo going with the X button. She could dash in midair twice and even follow it up with this cool dash attack, but that takes too long to come out too. I was so confused for the longest time, until I discovered that if she times a psionic throw at the right time, it would lift an enemy higher, making it possible to follow up a combo. But only a little bit. You can only throw 2 things before you have to touch the ground again, so it wasn't quite as creative as Yuito's. She wasn't terrible to play with, it just wasn't nearly as much fun as I had with Yuito. But I also think that the enemies themselves have a big part in that. While I find the others to be visually striking, I don't think they're the most competent action game enemies to fight. Serviceable, but not ideal. As it is, combat as a whole just feels ever so slightly disengaging, mainly due to the inability to read the others' attacks. Some are better than others, but most of their attacks are tricky to get a grasp on. This is a bit difficult to explain, so bear with me, but enemies don't have what I would call pronounced telegraphs. Unlike most other action games that see the enemy flash a color, have a tail above their head, or even something as simple as prolonging the wind-up animation to emphasize the anticipation motion. This helped the player know when to, 1, get out of the way of incoming damage, but 2, also come to grips on when to execute special counter maneuvers like parries or perfect dodges. SCARLET NEXUS doesn't have anything like this, however, thus it can be a bit difficult to read enemies. It doesn't hinder your ability to play the game or even play it skillfully. The argument could even be made that this encourages you to be more observant of the enemies and learn what their short wind-up animations look like, but I think some more noticeable tells would make flawless play more engaging, as well as giving those less skilled a helping hand. And also give more opportunities to execute a brain crush. Essentially, enemies have a stamina bar that depletes, and when it empties out, you can do a finisher cutscene that I admittedly love a lot because they're so gorgeous. Oh, what's that? You want to see one more? Okay. cool. But back on track. There are only a handful of other types to fight throughout the game. It's surprisingly limited, and besides the ones that are completely impossible to damage without the use of a specific SAS form, there aren't many unique strategies or countermaneuvers to get an advantage in combat. In the early game, it really just feels like the best strategy is to deal as much damage as you can while getting invincibility frames from perfect dodges and tanking hits. Then using healing items to repeat that process, and careful play isn't exactly a thrilling alternative. It's not even really attainable. With the lack of tells and warnings like I mentioned, and the fact that enemies can throw up big damage attacks with no heads up, can make battles feel like they drag on. The game does frequently encourage the use of SAS to defend yourself and get out of the way of attacks, but I wish there was something I could do that was more skill-based and not so cheap feeling. Another reason why things feel so disconnected is because the enemy's hit reactions are a little shallow. Most of the others are alright, if a little too beefy at times, but this problem is 10 times worse for character battles. All of them are the epitome of what I said a second ago. You're just tanking damage, trying to whittle down the health bar as much as possible, while executing as many perfect dodges as you can for a slight edge. And yeah, you can totally run in circles waiting for an opening and then use the SAS form that you're told to in order to stun them and get some damage in before the pattern resets. But it takes so long that way. It's not agonizing or anything, but it just gets so boring after such a long fight. And heaven forbid if there is more than one enemy character to target. The lock-on will make you sick. This lock-on and camera are some of the most finicky and slippery feeling I have ever played with. Your physical attacks can be pointed anywhere, even if locked on, and only seem to somewhat zero in on your current target, but projectiles only head towards locked targets. This isn't a major problem, but it can become one quickly if you need to switch your lock and prioritize another enemy. It is possible to cycle through targets by holding the right bumper and using the D-pad, which makes for some gold medal worthy finger gymnastics unless you come to a dead halt in the middle of a hectic fight. This is attempted to be remedied by automatically locking onto the first enemy you hit. This works for the most part with Yuito, but it can be a little annoying to try to be precise with Kasane and her wacky knives. The camera, and I know this is a pretty average YouTube game review thing to say, but I mean, it feels unfinished, guys. It's constantly trying to stay at one specific X coordinate, and it's like there's no setup for any other angles. In enclosed spaces, it's way too close. In wide open areas, it's at the same distance. When in combat, it does the same thing. There would be so many occasions where a better view of the battlefield would be immensely helpful, but it has one default and it sticks to it. Watch how it behaves when I run up an incline, or try to watch as it reacts to shifting degrees of incline. This doesn't look like it was properly finished, does it? And I want to dig a bit deeper into that point about giving a better view of the battlefield. Of course, I played both campaigns on the hard difficulty. Legitimate praise, I feel like the hard difficulty was perfect for me. Enemies didn't feel terribly overpowered, I never felt under-equipped, and the challenges were never totally unfair. But there are a few instances of unintentional cheapness. I mentioned a moment ago how enemies can throw out major attacks on somewhat of a whim with no immediate visible tells. I think those are manageable. They can be handled, but what can't be handled are projectiles that come from off-screen with no warning in the middle of a combo and knock you to the dirt. Projectiles make every fight worse, because if you're trying to bob and weave through these huge other's attacks and you finally stun him and start unleashing all of your attacks just to be sniped by a gob of water, it's so frustrating. When you have to use an SAS form, which are on time limits mind you, and get hit in the middle of it, that's a bunch of waiting around until it recharges. And it feels just like using Team Dark's Team Blast at the wrong moment and then having to wait to continue playing. Subscribe if you know my pain. So all fights tend to progress in a predictable way if someone's there to throw a wet or oil-covered blanket over your fun. You have to just run around and take out the projectile enemies while casually tanking any hits from physical others. And then once they're gone, you can get back to the game you were trying to play all along. And even with all my gripes and nitpicks about the camera and the lack of clarity in combat, this game is so easy, dude. A big contributing factor is the inclusion of these shop and save point guys that are everywhere. When I wasn't being showered by amazing recovery items by strolling just ever so slightly off the beaten path during missions, you can stock up on them all for dirt cheap. So you can tank those hits as much as you want to. Plus, whenever you talk to them, it's an instant full recovery for the whole party, as many times as you want to. I would heal and save, take 2 steps, fight a really tough boss, and then turn around and fully heal and stock up because I just can. And again, you can't go 2 steps without running into these guys. I'm sure this in-game area was supposed to be like a gauntlet of difficult encounters, but they literally throw these guys at you after every fight. So you don't get the chance to feel like you're in danger. Plus, and this is a big one, Scarlet Nexus has a mild case of what I'm dubbing Kingdom Hearts 3 syndrome, a particular ailment where the game showers you with so many utterly helpful abilities to plow through the opposition, nothing ever really feels like a challenge. All the SAS forms, combo vision, assault vision, brain field, the special items, perks you can add to Brain Crush to have it recover SAS and other things, brain field again because don't you just hate the X button too? And that's if you even feel like fighting at all because yeah, unless there's a barrier that pops up, you can just ignore the others. I don't recommend it because you won't get any experience, but towards the end of my Kasane playthrough, sheesh, you better believe I was skipping those repeat cutscenes, running through those final areas, and just trying to make it all go by quicker. Because, to bring it all back around, I think that ended up being my biggest problem with this game. It's so long. Part of my problem may be that I was marathoning it, yes. Part of my problem might have been that it crashed on me once and that my power went out at the end of the final boss and forced me to redo it, so I was just a tad bitter. But I also think it just asked for your undivided attention for too long. It was really fun figuring out combos and just playing the game. That was the best part actually. I can't understate enough how much fun the battle system is to break once you level up Yuito a little bit. Watching everyone's Bond episodes was fun. It was cool to see Gemma start to discover life outside the OSF, like trying new foods. Hey Yuito, that meatloaf was bussin', respectfully. Seeing some of Kasane's extra stuff was neat, but I had zero desire to do any of that stuff twice. What should have taken me 20, maybe 25 hours to see and have a fulfilling adventure took me nearly 50. It was so boring to see only a few extra tidbits of the narrative. It was boring to plow through the game with an immediately overpowered character that I didn't even enjoy playing as. Scarlet Nexus is probably one of the only games I've ever played with a New Game Plus feature that doesn't scale the next playthrough to your projected level at that point. Item pickups, enemy levels, nothing has been changed to compensate for my crazy high level and late game equipment. And around the second playthrough, I noticed that the Kingdom Hearts comparisons don't stop at the combat.
Your brains weren't connected, but your hearts were.
She's part of the darkness now. She doesn't need the light. You're a nobody!
Overall though, I don't know. There's a bunch of cool stuff that I didn't mention, like how there are in-game items you can only get by finding passwords hidden in the anime based on the game, which I thought was going to be a chore, but the YouTube comment section is apparently good for more than just calling me a f***ing idiot. The soundtrack goes so hard. Musubi's theme, Seiron's theme, there are plenty of bangers. Is this game bad? Not even close. Is it worth $60? Content-wise, yeah, I guess so. Are you missing out on the hottest action game sensation of the year? No. Is it a game you should get? That's one I can't answer for you. I enjoyed my time with the game. More specifically, I enjoyed my first 20 hours or so. I certainly would not recommend playing through it as quickly as I did. If you want to play through the entire game, both campaigns, then pace yourself. Maybe put it down for a little while after you finish the first one. But if you're into action games, it's on sale, you like episodic anime stories, you want to see more Hanabi, it couldn't hurt. Woo! And listen, I'm sorry if this one got a little scattered. I had a lot to talk about and probably didn't cover every minute detail I could have, but I just wanted to get this game behind me. I had no idea it was going to be such an undertaking. But I can safely say that you will not have to wait this long out of the blue for the rest of the year. We have a lot of videos in the works right now, and next month is Kana time, baby, and I can't wait! And we still have other stuff to discuss before then too, so make sure to stick around, and if you want to. I'm not forcing you, but it would be cool. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching. So thanks for stopping by, and have a great day.